in the last several years, we have seen calls that many Western groups or nations have been making, or many secularist groups have been making, and that is the equality between men and women. And this point has actually led a lot of women to lose their faith in Islam, because they are told that Islam does not treat you equally. An example is inheritance. The Quran is very clear that women get half of men when it comes to the inheritance. So where is the equality? And now there are voices in the Muslim world to demand that a woman gets the same share of inheritance as a man. Why should a sister get half of what her brother gets? Especially if she's in need. Sometimes a woman can be more in need to her father's inheritance than her brother. Maybe her brother is rich, he has his own business, he doesn't really need that much inheritance, but she needs it desperately. So why does Islam give her half of what it gives to her brother? And this point is actually causing some people to lose faith. So what do we say about that? First of all, we have to make it very clear that the Quran explicitly and clearly states that the inheritance of women is half of men. لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيْنِ. The male gets 2 shares than the woman. If she gets 1 share, he gets 2 shares. So this is a clear verse in the Holy Quran. This is not a matter of ijtihad and my opinion and jurisprudence. It's a verse in the Holy Quran that we cannot change. That's one point. The second point is, if a woman is in need of financial assistance, according to Islamic law, she must be given that financial assistance. If she's married, the husband has to spend on her. If she's not married, her father has to spend on her until she's no longer in need. And when we say spend on her, doesn't mean you give her what's enough for her not to starve. No. You give her such that she lives a comfortable life. Because some people think, oh yeah, I'm giving her. What are you giving her? Just food so she can survive? You think that's only what's the wajib? The wajib is to give her what's appropriate to her sha'n and status. So a father must provide that for his daughter. A husband must provide that for his wife. If they don't, let's say a woman says, I have no father spending on me, I have no husband spending on me. It is up to the Muslim treasury. The Islamic government has to give her. Imam Ali alayhi salam makes this clear in his treaty to Malik al-Ashtar. He tells him, Malik al-Ashtar, put some funds from the government to those women who are in financial need. You give them. So see, the Islamic law recognizes that some women might be in financial need. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given other ways. But why has Islam given men double the share of women? It goes to an economic point that you will find is applicable all around the world. In most societies around the world, including here in the West, here in the United States and Canada, usually, men are the breadwinners for the family. Usually they take the bigger financial obligation. Women are working, true. And they're contributing to the income, true. But who is contributing more financially? Who has the bigger obligation? Even until today, it's men. That's in the West, let alone in other countries of the world. So historically, because men have the obligation of providing for their families, if you look at it as a whole, then men need the inheritance more than women. Because they have financial obligations. A husband cannot say, you know what, I'd like to sit home and I don't need to work that much. You have to work. It's wajib, it's an obligation. Whereas no such obligation is on women. So men, generally speaking, need that financial assistance more than females. Now this doesn't mean that in one family maybe you'll have a woman who needs the money more. These are exceptions. When Islam gives us laws, Islam looks at the interest of most people. Just like when you examine civil laws in our society, right? You could argue that if it's 2 a.m. and you want to pass the red light and you know for sure there's no one there and you're just wasting your time, 40 seconds behind the light, can you pass it? If you do, will you get a ticket? Can you say to the police, there's nobody here? Will that work? Probably not. Why? The law is the law. The police will tell you, look, traffic lights are for the well-being of most people in most times. Yes, maybe in this time when you cross the light, you didn't endanger anyone. But we can't make exceptions. Because when you make exceptions, then you encourage people to start violating the law. So Islam looks after the well-being of most people, most families, most societies around the world. And in most societies around the world, men have the greater financial obligation. So they need that inheritance more. That's the second point to mention here. The third point, there are some scholars today, very few, even some Shia scholars, who believe when examining these verses, they believe that the Quran gave men more inheritance because at the time they were only working and women were dependents. Today, society is shifting and changing. Where you find today women are no longer that dependent on men. So they need that inheritance more. And so some of them are giving a fatwa that today if you live in a society in which a woman works like a man does, she has similar financial obligations, she gets the same share of inheritance. So some scholars are giving such fatwas, but they're very few. The majority of scholars would not accept that because they say we have a clear verse in the Quran. And when Allah makes a clear verse in the Quran and He doesn't tell us the reasoning behind it, yes, we may come up with reasons, with wise reasons, but in the end Allah doesn't specifically mention those reasons. So we don't have, the audacity to come and give a fatwa like that. So there are scholars who are issuing such fatwas in a number of schools of thought, but they are the minority of scholars. So I leave you with this final point, that if there's a woman who's financially struggling and she really needs the money, Islam has other ways. It's not just the inheritance. There are other obligations Islam has imposed on men to give. Her father, if he has money, if he's rich, he has extra money, and his daughter needs, he has to give her. It's an Islamic obligation. Some fathers think, you know what, that's it. If my daughter grows up and she becomes an adult, I have no obligation. Who told you? You still have an obligation towards your children if you have extra money. So if the father's not giving, if the husband's not giving, it's up to the Muslim treasury. They have to give her from the Muslim public funds, from the sadaqah, for example, from the assistance, from the khums. Yes, that must be given to them. The khums, for example, from the Sahm al-Imam, if they are not Sayyid. If this woman lives in a Western country, there is no Muslim public funds. Who is responsible for her? Let's say the father is unable to give her, or he's passed away. Then who are the next closest in kin to her? Her brothers. So her brother has the financial obligation of giving her, yes. Many people think that I'm only responsible for my wife and children. Who told you that? Al-aqrabuna awla bil ma'ruf. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated you to give, to be generous and to be charitable. And those who deserve your charity most are the closest to you. So if you, as a brother, if you have a sister who's in financial need and you're giving charity to others, that charity is not accepted. Allah will hold you responsible. Allah will tell you, you had a sister who was in need. Why didn't you give her? So there are ways Islam has given us in order to protect the financial status of those very poor women. So look at the bigger picture. In most societies around the world, who needs the money more? The man or the woman? In most societies, even here in the West, what do you say? The man. Because he has a greater financial obligation. Go to any society in the world. whether in the Middle East, whether even in Europe, that is most egalitarian compared to other communities and societies. Go to South America, North America, usually it's the man who has the financial obligation. So it only makes sense to give him more from the inheritance because there's an obligation on him. So he needs that extra help. Let me give you an example. Right now, if you look at the youth, a 20-year-old youth, 18-year-old to 25, usually when you're thinking of your future and your marital life and your family obligations, you, the sisters, generally speaking, is it such a big burden on you when you're 20 that you're saving up for your marriage in the future? Or usually that's not a priority for you? It's usually not. But what about the boys? That's the first thing on their mind. Study, yes, go to college, and then I'm going to have a family in the future. I need to start from now. See, it's an obligation. It's a burden. So if you're not married, if you're a boy, you have that obligation on your mind that in the future, I have to provide. So from now, you start saving, you start working, you need that extra assistance. Now, if you're married, if the boy is married, the man is married, then he already has an obligation towards his family. So he definitely needs that extra money. If the woman is married, she has someone who it's wajib on him to sponsor her. So no matter how you look at it, generally speaking, men, they need that assistance from inheritance more than women. So it's not to discriminate. It's just a normal, natural equation over here.